a serious question for all three of you guys, and we'll start with Golic. Damar Hamlin suited up, practiced for the first time since he went through that terrible ordeal in Cincinnati last year, Mike. And I'm just wondering, like I was thinking about it when I read the news, if I'd be able to go through what Damar Hamlin went through last year and ever play the game of football again. And I'm not certain I'd be able to. Like, we've spoken to certain players who said to us, hey, I had no idea that could happen to me out on a football field. And yes, it has me rethinking the entire game. And so, Mike, if that happened to you, and I know this is a really difficult question, but do you imagine you'd feel comfortable going back out there and playing again?
So obviously the first thing you do is, and which I'm sure he's done, is you ask, can this happen again?
Right.
And I'm sure there's a percentage that it could, but that we don't know because this was such a freak thing that happened. And then quite honestly, Stu, because this question went back, like when I was playing, you saw more guys get carted off the field who lost feeling, in their body with the hits that they took when you were allowed to have different kind of hits in the NFL. And I would always be asked that question as well after I retired and was doing the show at ESPN is, if you were laid on that field after a hit and couldn't move, and then obviously you got all of your feeling back, and would you want to go back out on the field? So I've had questions like that. This obviously different. You've actually passed away and you need to be brought back to life.
Yes, right.
I think a lot of it, Stu, is where are you in this? He's 25. Okay. If I was young before I was married, or even after I was married, but didn't have kids yet, there would probably, I would 99% say, I'm going back on the field. We're all young and dumb, and say, sure, this won't happen again, or, okay, that was horrible, but it's not going to happen again. I will beat this and I'll get back on the field. If I'm in my 9th year and I have 2 kids, Mike and Jake are both born, they're a few years old. It's before we had Sydney, but I'm going to have a 3rd kid or whatever. You rethink it a little bit and you say, okay, I got kids now. I'm getting a little older. Is this something that I want to mess around with? So I think that comes into play. Younger, a little less people around that you're responsible for. You may say, I'm going back. And quite honestly, as you're older, some may say that as well. But that would be my barometer of, if I have a family now, I have a wife and I have kids.
Where you're at in life.
Is that, do I want to risk that? So him being 25, I think I could easily say, being that young, now I was married by that point, but if I was not married or if I was just married, I still think I would, yes, go back out in the field.
Billy, you think you'd be able to do it?
I think exactly what Mike was saying. I think the fact that he's so young, he's 25, he still feels like he has something to prove. And it's not like a nagging, persistent injury history that he has there, right? It's something that kind of happened. And by all reports, it seems like he was out of it immediately, right? So we don't even know how much memory he has of what happened. So it was just one split second to the next. So there may not be that now, obviously, there's the recovery time period that he had to get back to where he is, but he probably still has something to prove. He doesn't have in the back of his head. I mean, I guess he could have, what if this happens again? But you talk to your doctors, you assess the risk, and you say, you know what? He's made the decision to go back there. And I think that a lot of young athletes that still feel like they have a lot to prove, that they're not supporting, young children, spouses, whatever, might make the same decision, even if it is an injury history, right? Like, athletes are just wired to want to go out on their own terms. And when that's kind of taken from you, sometimes you say, you know what, this isn't how it's going to end for me. Like, I still have something left to prove. I want to show people that I belong, that this won't be what ends me. Like, I will go out the way I decide.
So what I'm thinking here is, Mikey, would you do it before I respond to that?
I think they said it. I think they said it perfectly. Okay. It's really his choice, and if that's what he wants to do, that's how he wants to live his life, and that's great for him.
What, Mike? I guess what I'm getting at is there's a mental block. There has to be a mental block for him. Like, yes, I think we all agree. Okay, if the doctors cleared me, depending on where we're at in life, do we have kids? We get all that. We factor all that in. Once you get out of the field, though, and you have to tackle a guy, and his helmet is coming right at your chest, don't you think you're pulling up a little bit? Like, it's going to take a minute for him to get past that.
The toughest thing, and this obviously is a major thing where we're used to dealing with blown out knees or ankles or elbows or shoulders or whatever. And one of the most difficult things coming back from an injury is the mental side. You do all the physical rehab enough to where a doctor says you're good to go. But then you got to get out on the field. And is my knee good to go when I have to go full tilt and make that first cut? Is my knee going to be okay? That's what you have to get past, because you're physically fine. You know, you've rehabbed. The doctor says you're ready to go. It's now getting over that mental hurdle. This is a guy who took a hit in the chest and literally died on the field. Okay. So to think that won't be in his mind, because he'll have really nothing close to that until preseason games. Nobody really goes balls out anymore in practice. So that won't happen until preseason games when you're playing another team and there's going to be a hit, to where, how does he do that? Does he try and use his shoulder more so his chest isn't exposed? I don't know. But to me, that's the mental side of it. He's been cleared. He's practicing. So physically, he's okay to play. But man, that does not mean you are mentally ready to go until you can get out on that field and not think about it. Because when you think about shit and you get nailed with it, or that's a lot of times when it's in your mind, it can happen. So you got to play clean in your mind and be able to go 1,000 miles an hour, which the mentally is the harder thing to do.
I think at least, and I don't want to speak for you, Mike, but I think also we're answering this, if it was us, would we do it, right? It's not to say that he's necessarily making the right decision playing again, right? It is ultimately his decision.
Right, exactly.
As a former athlete, I was a college pole vaulter, so it's a lot different, obviously, right? I had an injury one time where I didn't go deep enough. I missed the pads. I hit the metal box. I dislocated my shoulder. Every time I went upside down after that, it was in the back of my head. And eventually I overcame it, right? But it's always in the back of your head.
Yes.
So he will have, probably, once you're getting into real time, real speed, it may come back and be in the back of his head, and maybe his mind will change on this.
That's
right?
what I'm saying. I would imagine if it were me, I would imagine the first time some guy's coming straight at me and I have to tackle him, I'd pull up. Like, I don't know if I'd be able to go through with it. I just don't know. I guess, well, I guess he won't know until it happens, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. You can talk about it all you want, but until it's somebody else going 100 miles an hour and you're going 100 miles an hour and there's going to be a collision and there's one every single play, you don't know. You don't know how you're going to deal with it until you get past it, until he goes through that hit and gets up and hopefully everything is fine. Each hit subsequent to that, even though we know it's a hit out of nowhere where it can happen, but each time he gets a hit and gets up and is fine, I think that will be a more of a mental relief to him, saying, okay, I'm kind of back where I'm supposed to be.